Psalm 6. In Psalm 6, we encounter David as a chastened believer. I think, I've experienced in my life people treating the idea of chastening in a fairly light way. I don't think anyone who has ever actually experienced the chastening of the Lord can ever regard it lightly again. The problem that the serious believer has when he finds himself in this place is that any introduction of sin or any participation in sin in a believer's life that brings him to this place, he has to realize may be the beginning of one of two episodes. It may be the beginning of the episode where the Lord takes him down and takes him out of this life, as he did with certain believers at Corinth. But it also may be the beginning of a process that is going to end proving him to be an apostate and not a true believer. He goes into sin and he doesn't come back. And having been very close to that point myself, I have a terror of it. And David is in that moment. Some of the writers think that this may have been composed as a morning psalm. But even if not, it is evident from verse 7 that it was composed after a sleepless, tearful night. The psalmist is being opposed by men, but he sees in their opposition a chastisement of the Lord. He makes no argument against the situation as being unjust or himself as being unjustly treated. We know that he is aware of the sin for which he is being chastised. Some of the writers think that after the sin with Bathsheba, after the death of the child, that David entered into an extended time of very painful physical illness, and that this may be a reflection of that time. And of course, being where he was as king and having people always in his entourage who were plotting to betray him, a time of weakness for a leader like this was also a time of vulnerability from people who were enemies. So it's a complex issue that David was facing. His concern is that God may be judging him in anger. If this is true, then there is no hope for his soul, because God does not judge his people in anger. He chastises us in love. And so if this is God judging him in anger, then he is without hope. His faith may have been proven to be false by his latest iniquity, and God may have come to the end of dealing with him. This is the concern of every believer, I think, when they have sinned and come under God's hand of discipline for that sin. I said maybe in the message yesterday morning that often we find Jewish believers asking for something by asking not to have the opposite of it. And that's how he begins here. Rebuke me not in thine anger, which means if you're going to rebuke me, please rebuke me in love. Please remember compassion and have compassion on me even in judgment. Neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. God does not do that with his people. He chastens everyone that he loves, but he never deals with one that he loves in anger and hot displeasure. He just doesn't. We have one who bore that for us, all of it, drank the last drop of that cup for us. The believer is aware that his sins are an offense to God and in complete need of being judged. He knows that God often chastens his people. His appeal is not that the Lord accept his sins, but that the Lord not judge him with the wicked. No one could stand such punishment as his sins actually deserve. This is the language of a true believer. He vindicates God as just. He fully owns his sin. He pleads for mercy from a heart of faith and true love for God. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are vexed. The NIV reads, Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am faint. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are in agony. The sins themselves for a believer are a continual source of dismay and pain for him. His ongoing weakness concerning his sins causes an agony that goes to his very bones, even if he is not ill. And David may have been experiencing both things, both an intense illness as well as an intense agony for his sin. He must have the mercy of God and confirmation that his sins are forgiven, or he cannot go on. And this has gone on for an extended time, which is what is meant there in verse 3. My soul is also sore vexed, so in my body as well as my soul. But thou, Lord, how long? In other words, how long is this going to go on? Believers know both in times of great victory and in times of great defeat. He knows them both. David has experienced them both. In his defeat, he knows that he can only rise out of it as the Lord dispenses grace or quickening in his sovereign good pleasure. He seeks to recover, but wonders how long the Lord is going to leave him where he is. The agony has been going on for some time. God's discipline often lasts longer than we would like. The challenge for the believer is to remain both faithful and repentant during the protracted discomfort that God has sent. You know, we live in a day where people think of God as sort of a push-button servant. You know, you push the button and you get what you want, and that is as far from the truth as it could possibly be. God does not operate on our schedule, nor does he change his schedule for ours, and he doesn't respond at the ringing of a bell. He is not our servant. We are his. Whatever he dispenses to us is just and is well-deserved and is needed. Otherwise, he would not do it. Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. O save me for thy mercy's sake. David has a sense that God has turned away from him. That is what it feels like. Even though we may know differently and we may preach to ourselves differently, the perception, the feeling, the sense is that God has turned away. He doesn't answer us like he did when we were walking with him before we sinned. He no longer experiences the close warmth of God's communion. He is not the victorious man he has been in the past. He understands the purposes of God. He only saves for his own name's sake. He doesn't save for our sake. He does it for his own name's sake. And so he appeals in that way. The truly repentant knows that there is nothing within him to motivate God to save him, so he appeals to what does motivate God, that is his mercy. For in death there is no remembrance of thee, in the grave who shall give thee thanks? This is spoken from the standpoint of human observation. The dead in the grave no longer have any opportunity to serve God in this world. They can accomplish nothing from there that will bring honor to God in this earth. And from that standpoint, David asks the question, what will be accomplished if I die in this state? How will this honor and glorify you? Possibly David is looking beyond his recovery with a hope that he will be restored to a place of ministry, a place where he can truly help his people to the honor and glory of God. But that's not where he is right now. I'm weary with my groaning. All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of all my enemies. The agony of struggling with sin and repentance is one of the most painful that a human being can know. It goes beyond the loss of loved ones, even beyond the thought of death. Repentance is an agonizing, painful, tearful process. It can wear one out physically and emotionally. Sadly, few people engage in this struggle with God because, one, they do not appreciate His glory. Two, they do not see the utter wickedness of sin. And three, there is no real desire, no real burning desire to be right with Him, to serve Him. Absent those three things, no person is going to pursue God in repentance, not real repentance, not the kind of repentance that we're seeing here in David. Depart from me, all ye workers of iniquity, for the Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. The Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. Let all my enemies be ashamed and sore vexed. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. I know of no enemies to personal repentance other than the spirits of hell. Certainly in many of the Psalms, the enemies of David bear a striking resemblance to the spiritual enemies fought by every true believer. But how does a downcast, defeated saint contend with them from the place of being under the hand of God? Confidence in God, in His mercy, and in His revealed truth, expressed aloud and often, is the best way to wage war against this enemy. Is this not what Jesus did when confronted with Satan himself? Prayer for the destruction of such enemies is certainly in keeping with the eternal purpose of God. So when the believer finds himself in a place of discipline like this, he often has the sense that he is surrounded by enemies, both of the physical and the spiritual kind. But rather than give in to defeat, David stirs himself up against his enemies. He is cast down, yes. He is under the hand of God, to be sure. He is miserable both physically and spiritually. He is not willing to be fodder for the Satan's mill. He is yet a child of God. He refuses to believe that God will abandon him forever. God will hear his cry. God will restore him. The last laugh is going to be on his enemies. Of this he is sure. So, he stirs up his soul to speak defiantly to his enemies, who are also the enemies of God. They shall not prevail because God will not allow his child ultimate defeat as long as he lays his hope and his prayers at God's feet. Sometimes God reduces us to a place where that's all we've got. But if that's all we've got, that's enough. We should cling to it. We should embrace it. We should express it to ourselves, to out loud to our enemies, as well as to those that we may discuss the matter with. Reminded of what Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad. For great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted the prophets," David was one of them, "which were before you. Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. It is the ordained and revealed will of God. The saint must not lose hold of his identity as salt. There are things that can be torn from us. There's things that we may, in times of weakness, give up. But this idea of being salt, we are all here to make a difference. We must not lose the determination to do so, even in agony, as David was. May the Lord bless his word to our souls.